Yes. So this is class 12 of Spurge's. We were actually started discussing this problem. So we will, since we have left it in the initial stages itself, I think it would be better that we start off with the explanation again. So let me start off here itself. So there are two parallel shafts connected by spur gears with 20-degree full depth involute profile. The materials are given: cast steel untreated, and material for gear is cast iron grade 35 heat treated. You have to transmit 15 kilowatts of power at 900 rpm. Diameter is given. So in this problem, the point is that diameter is given. Okay, so I can write it here. It's problem, this particular problem, you have diameter is given. Okay, velocity ratio is 7/3:1. So let me just write, you have alpha as 20-degree full depth. Regarding the material, you have pinion, that is sigma d1, which is cast steel, and it is untreated. If you look at the book in under table 12.7, table 12.7, we have become quite familiar with the table now, because we are taking both the design stress values and the BHN values if necessary from that table. So 12.7 table with its cast steel, you have only one type that is discussed there. You can straight away take that. So mostly we will be giving from this table only all the materials. Okay, because we have sigma D and BHN values readily available over there. So with this cast steel untreated, you have sigma D1. You have sigma D1 to be how much it is? 138. Yeah, this is 138.3 megapascals. So this is from table 12.7, which is page 234. Then we have sigma D2 with us. The material is cast iron grade 35, and that too it is heat treated. Okay, so sigma D2 values here will be, according to this table 12.7 on page 234, Seventy-eight point five megapascal. You can check it in your data handbooks. Okay. What about the power requirement? So the power requirement is 15 kilowatts of power at RPM is 900. Yes. Diameter of the pinion, that is D1, is to be 105 mm. Velocity ratio I is 7/3:1. Gears are subjected to steady loads with 8 hours per day of service. So why this sentence is given? That is steady loads with 8 hours per day. It has something to do with the service factor. Okay, so let me write it here again. Service factor for steady loads, okay, 8 hours per day of service. So according to table 12.31 on page 247, okay, so the CS value will come out to be 1. It says take face width as 10 times the module, so obviously K is equal to 10. What is actually saying is B is equal to 10 M. face width is 10 times the module. In our nomenclature, we have k is equal to 10, and that is one factor that we will use in the equations. Okay. So what are the things these are the things that we know as of now, and we will proceed with the same procedure as for the previous problems. Okay, the only change that you can find is diameter is explicitly given. Okay, 105 mm of D1 is actually given. So you no need to reiterate or give a trial and error method to change the diameter. Here, when we say design using Lewis equation, that means we have to design for strength. And design for strength, we are going to use the most basic equation for that, as in the previous problems. And then if, since it is not asked in the problem, we'll not move on to the wear load and dynamic load. Otherwise, we have to move on to those loads also. Now, we know that I is 7 by 3 is to 1. We also know that I is equal to N1 by N2 is also equal to D2 by D1 and also equal to Z2 by Z1. Okay. Now, if you just see, okay, since 7 by 3 is given, even D2 you can find out and even N2 you can find out. So we'll use those properties. So N2 is equal to N1 by, that is 900 by 7 by 3. So 7 into 3. So your RPM will come out to be some value. It is not going to be a whole number this time because it is 7 by 3. So you should get around 385.71 RPM. But it's okay. We'll keep it as it is. We'll not round it off because 7 by 3 is explicitly given for us, the velocity ratio. Next, similarly, we'll use a second equation, that is D2. D2 is nothing but I times D1 according to the equation. So that is 7 by 3 multiplied by 105. So this can be a whole number here. So this comes out to be 245 mm. Yeah. So you have two properties, that is 385.71 is the RPM of the gear and the diameter is 245 mm for the gear. Okay, I hope these things are very clear, very straightforward. And since sigma d1 and sigma d2 is already there for us, now as you have noticed in the problem, there is no mention of the number of teeth, and of course that you have to set, and also that you have to iterate or take a trial and error method for the number of teeth. Okay, so the diameter is set, both the diameters are set, the speeds are set, etc. Now you have to use those properties which are already set in order to find the number of teeth and its parameters, that is module, face width, okay, and any other properties that are required. So let us go to the next part. This type procedure I had discussed it in the previous class, so let me remind you what to do if the number of teeth are not given. So you have to temporarily assume number of teeth. Why we do this? Why this step is required? Remember, we have to find the weaker member. Okay, to find weaker member, there is a pinion, there is a gear. You have to assign some number of teeth proportional to the ratio given, that is the speed ratios, and temporarily decide which is the weaker member. Say for example, okay, this has 20 teeth, 30 teeth, and etc. Okay, so directly in the previous problem you assumed that it was say 20 teeth, but if you use 20 here, suppose say Z1 is 20, we did with one of the previous problems, but what will happen to Z2? You see the ratio here, it is 7 by 3. Okay, ratio is 7 by 3. So Z1 is I times Z1, sorry, Z2 is I times Z1, and that is 7 by 3 into 20 will give you a teeth which is approximate, okay, not exactly equal to, because if you make it exactly equal to, you will be left with some decimal values of teeth. So avoid these types of things, because 7 by 3 which is given, we know that teeth are whole number. So any one combination will definitely suit this. Okay. Of course, you can directly go with 3 and 7, but the problem is 3 is not a very practical number of teeth. And you will totally agree with that. There is no gear with just 3 teeth, okay, which will run successfully. So let us not go with 7 and 3. Let us not go with even 20, because you are not going to get, you are simply going to get some decimal point something something, and which is you cannot approximate it. So what we'll do is we'll not go with this step itself. Okay. So 7 by 3 will multiply with some number. See, how about multiplying with 6 and 6, both numerator and denominator? What happens here? This will be 42, this will be 18. Okay. Can you take 10? Yes, that also you can take. 10 by 10 also you take. 8 by 8, 9 by 9 also you can take. Of course, it's left to you, it's your choice. But principally I've taken 6 because you see, this is the minimum number of teeth in most of the cases that we take, 18. Okay. 18 is the minimum. In order to reach 18, you have to multiply with 6. But whatever you multiply with this number over here in the denominator, the same should be multiplied with the numerator in order to maintain the same balance or the ratio. So what we have done here, you have multiplied with a number which is closer to the minimum required number of teeth in all the cases. Of course, there is no hard and fast rule that 6 should be taken. You can take 7, you can take 8, you can take 9, 10, whatever. Okay, but take it something that is practically advisable. Practically advisable is 18 is a minimum number of teeth. There is a table that we used in the previous classes, the minimum number of teeth that we used. So according to that, 18 is a minimum number, so we'll go with that 18 figure itself. When you set this for 18 according to the ratio 7 by 3, then Z2 will be 42. So what is this 42 now here? This is Z2 and 18 is Z1. Okay, what we are looking at is Z2 by Z1 ratio. Okay, so I'll write it here. Z1 is 18, Z2 is 42. Once Z1 and Z2 are set, now you can go for finding Y1. So Y1 according to 20 degree full depth is 0.154 minus 0.912 by Z1. Okay, so calculate that, and Y2 is 0.154 minus 0.912 by Z2. So these equations form a series in which 20 degree full depth you have to take properly. Okay, whichever the type of teeth that is mentioned in the problem. So this will give you around, yes, can anyone tell me what are the values?
So Y1 is 0.1236.
Y1 is point.
Sir, I took different values. I took Z different values. I took 30 and 70.
Okay, fine, okay, fine. Anyway, what matters is the sigma D1 Y1 ratio. So no problem, yeah. Anyway, for Z1 as 18, you get around 0.103, and this is 0.1323 Y2 you get. So sigma D1 Y1, now compare how much it comes. So sigma D1 we have already calculated in the previous slide. Yeah. Sigma D1 was 138.3 megapascals. So here, when you calculate, it will come around 14.28, and sigma D2 Y2 will come to around 10.384. Even if you use any other values, of course these numbers will change, but definitely this result won't change. Sigma d1 y1 will be greater than sigma d2 y2. This conclusion will always be there. Okay, that is what we want for the time being. We want to find out which is the weaker member. So now it is very clear. Okay, now the gear is weaker. Okay, because sigma d2 y2 has come lesser than sigma d1 y1, the gear must be weaker. So design for strength is based on gear. So design is based on gear. Okay. We use the same form of the equation which we have used for unknown number of teeth. Okay, according to equation 12.5b, which tells us m is equal to root of ft by sigma d cv k into capital Y. Okay, so this is according to 12.5b. Okay, and we will use all the parameters based on this. What we want here, see, we want here y, this is of interest, which is going to change with every iteration. Rest all the things remaining constant. So let me square on both the sides. I can write m square small y must be equal to ft by sigma d cv k into pi. Why that pi has come? Because this capital Y, because capital Y is equal to pi into y. Okay, what I've done, I split that and brought it here. M square y is equal to ft by sigma d cv k into pi. So we will design it one by one. What are the things that we need here? So what is ft? Ft we have calculated. We can calculate it now. We'll calculate it one by one. Okay, I think I'll go for the next slide. Yeah. Ft is equal to 1000 PCS by V. So 1000 into P means here number of kilowatts, CS which is 1, which we have found out, and what is V? Okay, I think we require this V here, so let me do that V here itself. V is equal to pi D2 N2 by 60,000. So D2 is 245 multiplied by N2. N2 was a decimal value 385.71 divided by 60,000. The answer will be in meters per second. So you should get around 4.948 meters per second. This is your V value. So put that here, 4.948 meters per second. Okay, let me not write that. Yeah. So Ft value will be how much? This one you are getting
3031.53.
Yes, good. So 3031.5. Okay, 52 or 53, whichever is closer. You write that. Ft is done, V is done, but we don't want V directly. We want Cv, the velocity factor based on V. So since this is less than 8 meters per second, okay, so according to equation 12.6a, according to equation 12.6, okay, let me write the equation numbers here. So this is 12.7a, okay, 12.7a, page 205. Yeah, so 12.6a, again page 205. We have series of equations. 12.6 series gives you the different velocity factors at different velocities. So this is less than 8, so 4.948. So because of that, your CV value will be 3.05 by 3.05 plus V. So if you substitute it here, you should get 0.3813. This is your CV value. Just all the things I think we know. So we'll find out what is a m square y which is required. So that is Ft 3031.52 by sigma d value. Sigma d is 78.5. Next is CV 0.3813. Then we have K, which is 10, and then you have a constant pi. Yes, how much is the value?
3.224.
Yeah. Okay, 3.223 or 224. I'm getting around 3, fine. Now, this is a required value, so it's time to iterate. M, this is the module in MM. We'll try to select one particular module. Then we have Z, Z2. See, the number of teeth is still not specified. D2 by M. Okay, this is the number of teeth. Next is Y2. Y2 is again 0.154 minus 0.912 by Z2. Next, you have M square into Y2. Okay, Y2 or here I can say Y2 to be very specific. We are designing with respect to gear. Okay, M square Y2. So this module is in mm. Now looking at the figure itself, okay, 3.223, you will get an idea, okay, how much we have to use. So let us go to the recommended series tables and just try to figure out 12.2. Okay, so the reference is our table 12.2, page 229. So this gives is preferred one recommended series of modules. So of course, if you take one, it is not going to change much. 1.25, 1.5 also, even if it is squaring. After squaring and multiplying with y, you are going to get some value around 3. Okay. So let us take a value, say 2.5. It's a little bit difficult to find directly here. So let us say take 2.5 as a model, and the 2.5 falls in the first category, preferred choice. Okay. Yeah. If you say 2.5, then how much will be Z2? Yes. That D2 is 245 here.
98.
Yes, you will get a whole number. Correct. Yeah, 98. Then with this in mind, you should get around 0.1446 over here. Just check the values. If there are any changes, we'll do it here. Then m square y will come out to be 0.9037. Okay, of course, much below than what is required. Okay, so 2.5 is not sufficient for it, definitely. Okay, so this is less, much less. We'll directly try with 4 then, whether 4 is sufficient, because even with 2.5 to 3 it does not make much difference. Okay, when you try with 4 or even with 3, there is one small issue here, is that the number of teeth you are going to get in decimal values. 2.5 you got in a perfect number, Z2, that 7/3 ratio has been met. But when when you take modulus 4, here you might notice you will get around 61.25. Okay, 61.25 is the number of teeth. We'll just check the value first and then try to set it up later. Okay, we'll check the value first. How much will come? M square y. Does it come to some value? So if you take 4, Z2 will be around 61.25. Of course, you have to round it off, but let us just check the values. 0.1391 will be your Y2 for this value of Z2, and here it will be 2.02. Yeah, so again less, not coming up to the mark. So we will go to 5, and 5, I think 5 will solve the problem in both the ways. See, 5 is also totally divisible, that is 245 it will divide. So if you take 5, you will get 49. Then it's a whole number, good for us. Y2 will be
0.135.
yes, 1353, and this will be
3.38.
yes, correct. And this is satisfied. 3.38 is greater, okay, greater than this. So you can say m square y2 adopted greater than m square y2, which is required. Yes. So module 5 is going to satisfy both these things. So now you can say that okay, module is 5. So what has happened now? Z1 is, see, Z2 is 49. Okay, Z2 is 49. Module is 5 mm. Z2 is 49 teeth. Z1 is how many teeth? It is 3/7 of 3/7 of 49.
So 21.
21, yes. So with module 5, yeah, B is 10 m, which is 50. Face width is 50. Okay, so these are the design parameters. Model is 5, Z2 is 49, Z1 is 21, and B is 50. Okay, so what we did in this problem, we temporarily assumed some figure but in accordance with the design ratio, that is velocity ratio that is given, we took it as a whole number and then we followed it through just to find the weaker member, sigma d1 y1, sigma d2 y2. We found out gear is weaker. Then we proceeded with change of number of teeth with every iteration. And that is how we reached a conclusion that module 5 is going to satisfy all the needs. Okay. I think we can go with the problem 5 here on. This is just a continuation of one of the problems that we had already done in previously. So we'll take the values from there itself. Okay. It's actually a continuation of problem number 3. The only difference you can find is calculate the dynamic load and find the minimum necessary hardness. That is just an extension of the previous problem. Okay. Yeah. So I think I have taken down all the necessary data here. So module is directly given. Let me go back to problem number 3 where we discussed the same kind of problem. So this is problem number 3. It is all the same thing. It's just a continuation. So what happened there was you came across and designed that okay, the module is 4 mm. The module was 4 mm in this problem. Again 12 kilowatts, 1500 RPM of pinion. The gear is 4:1, center distance 200 and BHN value 200, phase width 10 times the module. So the same problem which I have done in problem number 3 previously, here the data is explicitly given for us. Here what is given? You don't have to solve for module here in this particular problem. So module is 4 mm. So students, if entire design is given, that is based on Lewis equation strength, then dynamic load and necessary hardness. So that becomes a very long problem. So what we may choose to do is, when given in the question paper, we may directly give you the model and ask to find the dynamic load and necessary hardness, so that the strength part is already taken care. Okay, so this is such a case. You need not follow through to the strength part. You can directly start from the dynamic load. Why? Because model is already given. It's already calculated for you. Okay. Velocity is also given. See, pitch line velocity means velocity V is 6.28. Okay, let me write the data here first. This is 12 kilowatts of power P, 1500, N1 is 1500 RPM of pinion. Gear ratio is 4:1. Module M is 4 mm and the pitch line velocity V is 6.28 meters per second. Both the gears are made of cast steel with a BHN value. So here BHN 1 and BHN 2 is equal to 200 and both the gears are made of cast steel. So in other words, sigma D1 is equal to sigma D2. And what is that value? Of course, some value, but I think for this particular problem, we don't require that. Because all other things are already mentioned here. Model is already given. So we don't require what is the value here. We will just mention it. That is, both are made of same material. And gears are subjected to light shock with 8 to 10 hours per day. I think that also is not required as here. If required, we'll come back to it. Do we require it? Yeah, maybe to carry this one. Okay. Phase width is 40 mm directly given. So that means K is equal to 10 over here, comparing module and phase width. So calculate the dynamic load. We'll come to that. If required, we'll recalculate some of the things. So dynamic load is FD is given by the FT part, that is the tangential load, plus K3V into CB plus FT divided by K3V plus root of CB plus FT. So which equation number is that? There is 12.12, page 207. We have used that in one of the problems previously. So K3V, you have to calculate each and individual small elements of this. So B is directly given. Now FT you need to find. We'll just go back and find what is that FT. The previous problem, did we calculate FT over there? Yes, we had calculated FT over there. If not, we can calculate again. So this is the FT part. Let me highlight this. This was your FT part which you calculated. If data is, you can directly take this down. FT is equal to 1000 PCS by V. and CS is 1.25 based on the load that is the operating condition that is given, light shock 8 to 10 hours per day.
So the FT value is 2398, not 2388.
2399, is it?
98.
98. Okay, okay. Okay, can anyone else also support that? Is it 1.2 or 1.25 you have taken? Just check. Anyway, okay, fine. If it is 2398 also, you will proceed with that, no problem.
I think I made a mistake there. Sorry.
Yeah. So 2388.54. I can stick with that value. So please take this down that you have already calculated. I need not recalculate again. Okay. Come back to this problem. So 2388.54. I'll directly write it here. This is FT value, newtons. Yeah. So K3 is 20.67 in SI units. Do not worry about it. Well, V is directly given, 6.28. B is 40, again directly given. The only point is to find out C. What is the dynamic factor? C. Okay, so let us go back to the table numbers. 12.12, 12.13 and 12.14. Yeah. So let us, so pages 236 and 37. Twelve point 12.13, 12.14. You have to refer all the three in order to get this value. So let us start. So when referring to table 12.14, you have velocity 6, okay, 6 meters per second. So velocity in meters per second. You have error, which is described in mm. You have a value of 6 with 0.059 and a value of 8 with 0.05, value of 8 at 0.05, 050. Okay, so with 6.28, what is the value? E. So interpolate this value over here. So how to write the interpolation equation? 6.28 minus 6 by 8 minus 6 will be equal to Emax minus 0.059 by 0.05 minus 0.059. So interpolate this value. What is the maximum allowable or permissible error? Maximum allowable error is Emax. So I'll write the result here now. Emax must be equal to
0.0577.
Yes, 0.577 mm is correct. Now with the, you have to compare with what is the maximum of probable error between the gears. Okay, so let us go to, see the model is already given, so that is why you can say for module 4, where it is, yeah, for m is equal to 4 mm means module is equal to 4 mm. Okay, according to table 12.13, so class 1 gear, okay, class 1 gear, so error is equal to 0.0508 mm, and here you have 0.0577 mm. Okay, so here it says probable error should be, maximum of probable error or should be less than the permissible error. So here this condition is satisfied, E is less than Emax. Okay, Emax was 0.0577, so this is satisfied over here. Now for the dynamic factor, so let us go to table 12.12 and try to find out what is the error here. See, for dynamic factor, what are the requirements here? Both the gears, okay, let me go to the definition. Both the gears are made of cast steel. Both the gears are made of cast steel. So here it is steel and steel combination. Okay, next, of course this is not, have they given anything with respect to this one, 20 degrees? Not given. Okay, go back to that same problem. Okay, one small data we have missed here, and even if the data is missed, you can straight away assume that alpha is 20 degree full depth if not mentioned. Steel and steel 20 degree full depth, if you use these values, then according to the error table, okay, so errors E and the dynamic factor C is, see, 0.04, you have 457.8, and this 0.06 you have 686.7. Okay, for this combination steel and steel 20 degree full depth, 0.04 457, 0.06 is 686. So where does our value fit in? Which is our value? The our value is 0.0508. 0.0508 is our value. Okay, so for that interpolate again, and this should be the value of C which we are trying to find. Okay, interpolation 0.0508.04 by 0.06 minus 0.04 must be equal to C minus 457.8, and this is 686.7 minus 457.8. C value must be 581.406. Now substitute in the FD value, 2388.54 plus 20.67 into 6.28 multiplied by 581.406 into 40 plus 2388.54 divided by plus root of this entire value in brackets,
13869.54.
Yes, this will be your value. Okay, yes. 13869.5. I'm getting around 59, but okay, very close to your value. So this will be your dynamic load. So that calculates the first part. Okay, in the question it says calculate the dynamic load. So this part is done. This is the dynamic load on the gear. Second part asks us find the minimum necessary hardness. Okay, the second part, minimum necessary hardness, how much it should be. Okay, so we can go for minimum necessary hardness, means it's the surface property that we are asking about. So you have to calculate what is the wear load of that and compare it to the dynamic load. So wear load Fw, as we discussed previously, d1 dq into k, and d1 specifically means the diameter of the pinion, irrespective of whichever is weaker or stronger. So anyway, we will calculate all other things. So d1 is directly given, I think, was it given? Problem here. Since we have already solved this problem, we can directly take it. Otherwise, necessary information will be given. So
D1 is 80.
80, correct. D1 was 80. Let me go back and just see that problem here. Yeah. In this particular problem, we had center distance 200 and we had the ratio D1 as 80 and D2 as 320. So let me write that down here. So D1 is 80 mm and D2 as 320. We'll take all the values from there. Others explicitly it will be given here. So Q is equal to 2d2 by d1 plus d2. So 2 into 320 by 80 plus 320. So it should give 1.6. B is 40, directly given. Okay, so D1 is 80, that is also there. So let us calculate what is what about K value. Okay, that is the question. What should be done with the K value? So let us go to this is one new thing that we have not discussed previously. Table 12.16. Let us go to table number 12.16. See, the previously what we had done is when discussing this K value. Okay, let me go to this page. Previously, what was done is, what is this K? K was a function of sigma ES and all that. Many things were there. Sigma ES square. You might remember some calculations we had done. Okay, that also can be one of the things. But there is a table which describes all those values. So let us go to this table and to find K. So under this, you have noticed that there are combinations of materials. So you have steel and steel, you need that. Both pinion and gear, steel and steel you require. Pinion is steel, gear is also steel. Fine. Then alpha is 20 degree. BHN value for both is 200. Okay, this is both is 200. BHN1 and BHN2. So if you closely look, there is only one combination which gives that. Okay, carefully observe, there is steel and steel, both the ways, pinion and gear. Alpha is 20 degrees. BHN1, that is for steel also, that is pinion also, it is 200, and gear is also 200. With all those things, only one value will fit in over there, and that value is 0.539. Even if you do the otherwise calculation which we had done previously, which is a calculation, let me go back to that problem in one of the class, just to recap your memory, just to remind you what we had done. I think problem number 1, yeah, problem number 1 we have done. Yes, in problem number 1, we discussed about surface endurance limit, and here sigma ES square sine alpha by 1.4, 1 by E1 and 1 plus 1 by E2 we had done. Okay, problem number 1. And you use the BHN value, average of that, and then we recalculated it. Even if you do this calculation now, okay, you are going to get a very similar value. So these are the values which are already present over there. Okay, these values which are calculated for us are already given in table 12.16 for some standard values. And you look at this in this particular problem, problem number 1. Okay, so the BHN value was 200 and 150. Okay, if it was steel and steel, and you got the value to be 0.294 after calculation. Just look that same value in the table now. Refer to table 12.16, page 239. What you should look at? You should look at BHN1 to be 200, BHN2 to be 150, steel and steel combination. You'll get the same value. You just see there 200, 150 under 14.5 degree. Okay, here this was 14.5 degree problem. Under alpha is 14.5 degree, you will get to 0.294. Got it? Okay. So here you can either go by this way, that is use this formula and then come back, okay, with the E value to be 207, okay, or if the values are readily given, you can go there. The problem happens when, see, 12.16 is limited to a certain number of values. It may not be possible to give you each and every combination. When each and every combination is not given, then use this method. Okay, use this method, whatever we calculated till here. Similarly, for this case, since the method is already discussed, we need not recalculate all the things, because this combination we find 200 and such values. Even if you didn't have this combination, for example, say this was absent from the table, you can go by that method. Okay, sigma ES square and with the sine of 14.5 degree by 1.4, that formula you can still use. Okay, so both these things, whether it is with the table and without table, both these things we have made aware of. Okay, now 0.539 is the value as given in this problem. Let us calculate how much it comes. W is 80, this is 40, this is 1.6, and this is 0.539. So this is the small calculation which comes to around 2759.68. But we know this is not at all sufficient. Okay, so since FW is lesser than FD, okay, design is not safe from Where consideration. So equate it. Let Fw equal to Fdu. That is, value you take the same. In other words, what I am doing, D1 B Q K must be equal to Fd, but K should be a new value. So D1 value, okay, all other things remaining the same, the K new value must be equal to Fd by D1 BQ. So this is 13,869.59 by 80 to 40 to 1.6. So this value comes out to be 2.7089. So here 2.7089, here it says find the minimum necessary hardness. So K new should be the minimum necessary hardness. I can say load stress factor K. So let us go to that particular part. 2.7089, if it is a K new value. Okay, first let us write the conclusion. Okay, I think let me go to the next slide. I think till now, here you have copied. Okay, you have taken a note that K new value should be 2.7089. The value which was given for what to say, untreated material problem, that is, a material straight away taken without any hardness changes on the surface level, was 0.539. Now you require 2.7089, means it's a surface property which needs to be altered. 2.7089 needs to be, or it should be from this to this, should need to be altered. Okay, so let us write the conclusion first, then let us look at the table and find the hardness value. Since Fw, sorry, Fw less than Fd, okay, the wear starts before the dynamic load is reached. Hence, it is subjected to heat treatment so that it can be surface hardened to a higher value of BHN, for which the value of K is 2.7089. So it's a surface property which we are dealing with without changing the material inherently, without changing the entire material itself and providing a new value of sigma d. What we are doing is hardness value of the surface we are increasing by subjecting it to a heat treatment. So which is the value we are suggesting? 2.7089. Then the value of how much it was, 0.5 or something, yeah, 0.539, yes. So with the 2.7039, which value will come around? Okay, Of course, here in the table, when you look, okay, if you look in the table, 12.16, when you look, okay, page 239. So for these things, alpha is equal to 20, okay, it should be steel and steel combination, okay, any value which comes to 2.7089 or beyond that. Actually, we have one line which gives us 2.3. Anyway, that is not at all sufficient. So we can go beyond that. Yes, we can go to, so there is a line which tells us that BHN value of 1, that is pinion, should be, sorry, 450, not 400. Yeah. And BHN value of 2, that is gear, also should be 450. You just look at that line. With these two combinations, the K value comes out to be 3.226. And it suits our problem also. If I go back to the definition, both of them are made up of cast steel. So both are made up of the same material. Okay, so it makes sense to give that heat treatment to both in such a way, in the same way, such that both the BHN values are same, 450, 450. Only then this can be achieved. Okay, of course, the endurance limit, you see, initially when it was 200, it was only 480. Now it has gone to 1167. So almost 3 times increase in this endurance limit or surface hardness value. With this combination, sigma ES comes out to be 1167 according to the table, 0.0 megapascals. Okay, or Newton per mm square.
So we can calculate the BHN value with the equation also, right?
Yeah, correct. That also
Because
can be.
that way it is coming 415.
415. Okay. So that is what I told you. 12.16 is a table which gives you some standard values. Any intermediate values, intermittent values, you can calculate using the equations. Okay, so this is a rough suggestion. Okay, we can use BHN value to be 450. Maybe 415 or something you get. Yeah, definitely possible. Of course, if you use the table, this is the suggestion that we have. Okay, so I think we got a fair idea about how to tackle the problems when diameter is given or only the number of teeth is given. When both are not given, which one to assume, from where to take the values, and then what to do with the dynamic load factor, which BHN values to select, and the importance of materials, okay, and their properties. Okay, so I think these are the different types of problems. All types have been discussed in the spur gears. Okay, we can now slowly move on to the next set. We'll just give an introduction today, and hopefully, yeah. So we'll discuss a little bit about helical gears, how they are different from the spur gears. That we'll concentrate on today. As the name itself suggests, it's helical, or it gives you a helical groove on a cylinder. So what is a helical gear? So it's a groove cut on a cylinder in such a way that if you continue or project the groove, okay, suppose say you project this groove, okay, you project this groove along, it will form a helix over the cylinder. So it is something like this. You have a cylinder, okay. So this groove will continue just like this. Okay, you have seen a drill bit, twist drill. So that is a helical groove, right? So with a different angle, it forms a helical gear itself. So each of those grooves form a teeth. So that is a helical gear for us. How it is different from a spur gear? Suppose this is the axis. In a spur gear, as the definition itself suggests, that in a spur gear the teeth are cut parallel to the axis, whereas in any helical gear it is at an incline. Okay, it has some angle with respect to the axis of rotation. Now why do we require such a combination? Okay, why do we require, why can't we, of course we can do all the things with the spur gear, which is pretty easy to manufacture. Why would we require a helical gear to perform the same operation? It is everything to do with how the teeth engages and disengages. So in the spur gear combination, what happens? You have a teeth which are cut parallel to the axis itself. So one teeth engages, rolls over each other, that is using a line contact. Okay, line contact it has, and then disengages, soon to be taken over by the next set of teeth. Okay, so that is how the spur gear engagement occurs. Whereas in a helical gear, it is a combination of both. Of course, there is a line contact, but along with that, there is also a surface contact between both those teeth. It is kind of like one teeth is rolling over the other teeth continuously. So the engaging starts at one end and continues through the other end. Okay, here it is not one end, it is directly perpendicular like this. The engagement is directly perpendicular. Face to face it comes, hits, goes through a line contact and disengages. But this is not like that. The engagement is from one end of the teeth. It gradually traverses through the entire length, the face width of the teeth, and then disengages from the other side. Okay, so this is the major difference between a spur gear and a helical gear. Depending on how the gears are set, you have a left hand helical and a right hand helical. It has something to do with your own hands. So you place your left hand and keep your thumb at an angle, and that angle is called as the left hand helical. You do that same thing with the right hand and you'll have a right hand helical. So it depends on the perspective. Okay, your perspective of how the rotation is, your plane of weaving. Okay, from your perspective it should be left hand and right hand helical. And how the combination is done, you see here one small example is given, that they are placed opposite to each other. You see the helix is this way here, the helix is that way over here. Okay, so this is one axis of rotation, this is the other axis of rotation. So you have one teeth, the engaging starts at one end of the face width, traverses to the other end, traverses through the entire thickness of the teeth. What is the advantage with that? Let us discuss. So the first 2 points I've already discussed with you. Parallel, and this is a helix on a cylinder, fine. In spur gears, what happens is, though the contact is very simple, there is a problem. You see what happens is, the contact between the meshing teeth occurs along the entire face width of the tooth, resulting in sudden application of the load. Okay, as we had discussed that the engaging happens directly face to face on one line, and for this tooth, that is the driving tooth and a driven tooth, and all the load falls on this line, gradually traverses from dedendum to addendum and then disengages, soon to be taken over by the next set of teeth. And the impact on this is highly sudden. That is, You suddenly engage and suddenly disengage. It is like on and off switch. Whereas in helical it is not like that. In helical, begins machine teeth with a point on the leading edge of the tooth, gradually extends along the diagonal line across the tooth. So what happens? Initially, the one end of the teeth receives a load slowly, then there is a gradual increase with the increase of area. So one teeth kind of meshes or slides over the other tooth, resulting in smooth operation and quiet operation. Whereas if you compare that with the spur gear, due to sudden engaging of the load, it results in impact conditions. So a lot of shock conditions are there for each and every tooth and generates noise in high speed applications. In all the automobiles, if I just want to give an example to understand, all the automobiles, the first gear is usually, I can say 99.9% of the cases, spur gear combinations. And the second, third, fourth, okay, maybe you have already known this because some of you are already working on some automobile and related teams. So second, third, fourth, everything comes out to be helical gears. Why is this so? Why we require first gear to be spur gear combination and the rest of them to be helical? Okay, you might have a question. Why spur gears are preferred for high loading applications? Okay, and this is preferred for low loading applications. So what happens is, the clue is, see, the first gear usually has high torque. Starting torque is very high. For any automobile, for any machinery, the starting torque is very high. That means it should have a very high loading capacity, high load bearing capacity on the tooth, and that is given by the spur gear because the entire face width takes part in the load bearing capacity of the tooth. Whereas in helical gears, as we had seen, that the engaging starts from one end, it starts somewhere over here, then gradually it fills up and then comes here. Suppose there is a very high load, then in the entire load is concentrating over here, it will immediately go to fatigue failure or sudden failure. Okay. Whereas the moment the spur gear operates, entire load is on the entire surface of the tooth. Of course, it's a line contact, but distributed over the entire line. Whereas here it starts with a point contact, then gradually becomes a surface contact because one tooth slides over the other gradually. Okay, the full loading is realized only when the total teeth has come here and then starts to disengage. So this is the major difference between a spur gear and helical gear. That is why spur gears are usually used for high loading applications and in automobiles particularly for the first gear combination. The second, third, fourth, where the torque requirement is less and speed requirement is high, we go with, so I can say this is less torque combination, we go for helical gears. Okay, so this is regarding the spur gear and helical gear. Rather than explaining these sentences, I will just explain here what happens in the next slide. We have understood that helical gear means it's like a helical groove or a helical line drawn on the cylinder. Now just imagine what happens. Okay, this is one particular figure here. Let us go to this explanation in the next class. What does this angles mean and all that? But let us concentrate over here. What is this? See, in the spur gears, you did not have this complex figure. In the spur gear, since it was, I'll just give an example here. So this is with respect to spur I'm explaining, just to understand what are the differences. In spur gear, see, you had one teeth engaging, disengaging. How many components did you have? You had this normal called involute F. This was divided into just two components. One is FT and one is FR. And we know that FR we usually don't take. Even if that exists, we don't take it at all. The reason being that even if you take FR, the load requirement on the tooth will be reduction. So when you take only Ft, it is going to be a very helpful scenario for you. Even if Fr exists, when we discuss the Lewis equation, Fr is an exaggeration where the compressive load will act on the tooth, helping the tooth more rather than loading the tooth more. It is not going to load the tooth more, it is actually going to relax the load. So Fr, we don't take it at all, we only concentrate on the tangential load. And moreover, we have only two things. F component, which is involute component, is divided into two parts. One is Ft, one is Fr. Only two components. So the force diagram will be something like this. This is Ft, this is Fr, this is F. Okay? Only two things. But look at helical. Helical is not so easy. Since it is helical groove on a cylinder, the involute force F, or called W here, you see it comes normal to the face of the tooth. When you have something normal to the face of the tooth, then you have three elements. That is Wt, or also called Ft, tangential tooth load, Wr, or also called Fr, which is the radial tooth load, and there is one more component called the new component, which is totally absent in spur gears, called the axial. Okay, so this diagram depicts that you have the main tooth load that is directly acting on the face of the tooth, the normal tooth load called F. Then you have Ft, which is the tangential tooth load component. Since it is on the 3D diagram, with respect to the axis, you can divide into three parts now. This vector F has three components in 3 dimensions. One is Ft, one is Fr, one is Fa. Ft and Fr you are familiar with. The additional component called Fa is an axial load. Now, Ft is responsible for moving the tooth or providing rotation to the tooth, to the entire gear, sorry. Fr is something that we usually neglect. We are not bothered because anyway it is going to help the tooth itself, not put any extra load on the tooth, providing compression to the tooth. But there is one more component you have to be very careful with, which is called Fa. See, this is a problem for us as long as we use the helical tooth. What happens is one component is trying to push in or out. Okay, in this particular case it is trying to push towards us. The entire gear set is trying to get pushed. That is due to the extra component of the axial force, and because of this the bearing selection for helical gears is little bit complex. In spur gear you can give only radial bearings. Okay, only radial bearings, but in helical gears you require radial combination also and also axial. So something like to support it when the gear is going to get pushed in or out of this screen, in or out of this plane. Okay, I hope you got an idea. In the next class we'll go into all the details, that is what is that phi n, normal moduled and a normal pitch, circular pitch, etc. What are those combinations and how equations are formed. All these things we'll discuss in the next class. And this is one of the slides also we are going to discuss about the radial component, tangential component, axial component. Okay, how they are balanced here, and how to calculate all those parameters and how to solve problems. Okay, so just in a nutshell, spur gears are very easy to handle. They do not produce axial thrust. Spur gears don't have axial thrust. Fa component is 0 here, is equal to 0, whereas here it exists. That is why you have to give a taper roller bearing or some bearing which will handle, which is going to handle the axial load. Second, spur gear is more efficient if you compare it with a helical gear of same size. Why it is called more efficient? Even though rattling sound is more, why it is called more efficient? Remember, spur gear only has a line contact, whereas helical gear, initially it has a point contact, then maybe a line somewhere in between, but wholly it will slide over one over the other. That means it will have almost a surface contact. So what happens? More heat is generated, so more power loss and less efficiency of a helical gear. even though it is very quiet in operation, the price that we pay for quietness in operation and smooth operation is that it consumes more power and it is less efficient. And finally, this is obvious, spur gauge being the simplest, easy to design and manufacture, here it is more complex to manufacture. Maybe you have gone through the machine shop class where you had an indexing plate in order to make a groove over a cylinder and manufacture a gear. So if you have practiced with the gear hobbing machine, you will understand that okay, you have to index it and also provide a rotation when the gears are being cut out. So that is the way helical gears are cut out. It is more complex when compared to spur gears. Okay, I think with this small introduction, we are set to understand what are those various parameters and their definitions. And in the next class, we will try to solve some problems. Okay. Okay, students, we'll meet next class on Friday afternoon, that is 2 to 3:30 class. Okay. Till then, be safe and don't be confident. I mean, be confident, but not too confident or overconfident so as to neglect your own safety. Have proper social distancing because cases are getting widespread. Wherever you are, be safe. Okay, and see that you follow up with the portions thoroughly. Okay, thanks for joining.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.